Everybody turn to Hebrews chapter 11. We are looking at faith. And again, we're using this definition. Faith is the confidence that something is true even though you have not seen it or not seen it yet. So basically, it is a full confidence that it's absolutely fact, right? This thing that you're putting your faith in, even though you haven't seen it. What's an example of something you haven't seen, but you know it is true?
Electricity.
Electricity, yeah. Never seen it, right?
Seems important.
That's right.
Heaven.
Heaven, right. Haven't seen it yet, but we will, right? So this is kind of looking back, like we have not seen creation. We didn't see God create all things. We did not see Adam and Eve. We did not see Jesus die on the cross. We did not see Jesus walking and feeding the 5,000. But by faith, we know that it is what? True. And not seen it yet. Heaven, salvation. Just promises, daily promises. Sometimes I can just be, I know he's going to take care of this problem. I know he's going to get me through this by faith. Even though we haven't seen it yet, we know God will keep his promises. In fact, it's really just kind of a different wording of Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. So if everybody is there, I'm not quite yet, but Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1 says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." So it is that confidence, that hoped for. It's substance, confidence of things hoped for. Things we have not seen what? Yet. Things that we hope for. And the evidence of things not seen. I haven't seen them, but I know that they are true. And there's a lot of them, right? We put a lot of confidence in this Bible here, right? That all of this is true. Now, faith is only as good as what? What you're putting it in, right? Because everybody out there lives by faith. But a lot of people are putting their faith in what? Other things. That may be true, they may what? Not be true. So it is best to live your life putting your faith in something you can have confidence that is true, even though you haven't seen it or haven't seen it yet, right? And what gives us that kind of confidence in God's Word?
Been right so far.
Been right so far. When somebody like Isaiah writes something and then we see from history that it has happened, that gives us some confidence that, hey, if he said something in Matthew or said something in Revelation, it will what? It will happen. So it gives us confidence, right? And there's historical, there's other reasons. Plus, we can see it in our daily life, can't we? How many times has God kept his promises to you?
Every time.
Yeah. So, we can see it in our own life. So, and faith is important. By faith, we are first and foremost what? What's the most important thing that faith gives us? Salvation. By faith, we are saved. Saved from our own sin, the penalty of which is eternal death. But by faith, not by works, but by simple faith. Faith in what? What are we putting our faith in?
That Jesus' death has atoned for our sins and that we will join him in resurrection life.
Right. So things we haven't seen. We didn't see him die. We didn't see him, but we're putting our faith that happened, but also that he will keep his promise that was sufficient, right? Now, we're not going to stand before God, and God's going to say, yeah, I know he died for your sins, but I just need something else. I just have this new list of 10 things. I'm going to see if you made those too, right? That it was sufficient. That paid completely. And if we what? Simply put our faith in him to save us, he will, right? And we'll have eternal life. That's a lot of things we've got to put our faith in, isn't it? But we have confidence, don't we? And that little bit of faith allows us to be what? Saved. Now, of course, that means we have to turn against other notions, right? How many people out there are living daily with their faith that there is no judgment? They're living by faith that they'll never be held accountable. Or faith in some religion or system that will make them saved, will get them to a heaven. See, everybody lives by faith. It's important to what? Have faith in the truth and have confidence in the truth. Also by faith we can what? Let's look at Hebrews chapter 11. Bob, can you read verse 2, please?
For by it the elders obtained a good report.
Okay. By faith, we can what? Get a good report. Another way of saying it is verse 6, Matthew.
But without faith it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him.
Okay, so by faith, we can basically please God. And here, well done, my good and faithful servant. And it's two parts, isn't it? You need to do this one first, right? Because without salvation, it's impossible to please God. You can't, anything you do doesn't. But once you are saved, by faith we live. We walk by what? Faith, not by sight. Not by our own perceptions, our own ideas, not by the world's concepts. We walk daily putting our faith in God, in His Word, in His promises, in His instructions that they are best. And by faith, we what? Please God. And that's where we start getting some examples. Basically, Hebrews chapter 11, as we've seen already, gives us an example of people from history who did things by faith. And each one's a little different. We saw, first of all, Abel is the first one mentioned. Who's Abel? Adam and Eve's kid. And what was his occupation? Shepherd, right? Now he had a brother named Cain, and his occupation was what? Gardener, farmer, right. Was one a better occupation than the other? More important than the other? No. What was the difference, though, between the two of them when it came to their relationship with God?
One cared and one didn't.
Right. One, it says he gave the very best of his flock, the choice of his flock. That requires faith, doesn't it? To give God best, to give anybody your best means what? You don't have it, right? If you're trying to get the best flock possible, it's kind of tempting to sit there and say, well, I'll give him my second best. I'll give him my lamb. And that's basically what Cain did. What did Cain bring? It says he just brought of his harvest. Just whatever. And when God confronted him, he said, hey, sin is at the door. If you take this kind of attitude of God doesn't deserve it, or God only needs this, or what if I give him my best and then I don't have the best to have the best seeds in order to have the best crops, then we're all going to starve. Again, that's a lack of faith. By faith, Abel said, I will give the best. Do we have to do that too? It takes faith to give God everything, right? Give him the best of our time, the best of our energy, the best of our resources, and basically say, God, they are yours, right? But that's the way we what? Please God. And in fact, as we know from Cain, if we don't, what's the result? We kill our brother. No. Doesn't have to be one-on-one, right? We what? We end up sinning. We end up letting that thing get between us and God, right? And then we don't please God. Then we saw Enoch. And we looked at kind of his history. I mean, Enoch was there in a world which was sliding further and further away from whom? From God, right? He had his son Methuselah. Methuselah had Lamech. Lamech had who? Noah. So we're that close to the end there. It was not too long before Noah came along that Enoch left. And what was the world like? What was it? Where was it going? Did they care about God? No. At least Cain was bringing sacrifice. At least he was acknowledging God. At least he was, talking to God. What was the world doing? Doesn't care at all about God. They're just kind of doing their own thing, sliding further and further away. Yet Enoch did what? He, it says, pleased God. It says also then he what? Walked with him. And that takes faith, doesn't it? In the face of everybody else around us and the world going to hell in a handbasket, as they say, to stand up and say, I am going to do what is right. And I'm going to do what's right. And I'm going to teach my son, Methuselah, to do what is right. And he will teach his son, Lamech, to do what is right. And he will teach his son, Noah, to do what is right. And even though the world is just going worse and worse and worse, as we're going to see today, right? And as we saw last week, basically Methuselah died at the flood. Lamech died right before the flood. God cleared the table of that line and said, I'm just Noah and his sons. And we will move forward from there. So, Abel, we see someone who gave the best to God by faith. And Enoch, he pleased God by faith. Today we're going to see Noah. Let's go to chapter 11, verse 7. What does he do by faith? Amy, have you got that? Hebrews chapter 11, verse 7.
Okay.
All right.
By faith, Noah, being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen, in reverent fear constructed an ark for the saving of his household. By this he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness that comes by faith.
Okay. So now it's easy to just say that Noah what? Obeyed. But it goes deeper than that. What did God tell Noah to do?
Well, it says first he warned him of something not seen as yet, which is literally the definition of faith.
It is a definition of faith. He warned them that what? And we're going to see this in a minute. We'll go back to the Genesis, but that it was going to flood the earth. Had they seen rain before? So you talk about things not seen yet. They hadn't seen that. They didn't see a flood before, right? And we're not even really sure where Noah exactly lived. We don't even know if he's seen that much water before. Maybe just had streams and wells and things like that. We're not really sure exactly where he was at. But, and Noah what? What does it say he did? By faith, believing God's promise that he was going to destroy everything, what did he do? He built. He worked. By faith, he worked. It's not just obedience. There's a lot of different kinds of obedience. We're going to see different kinds of obedience. This is a very specific kind of obedience where God says, I need you to do something. Sometimes it'll be go someplace. Sometimes it'll be talk to this person. Sometimes it'll be stop doing this, right? There's different kind of, or do this. There's different kind of obedience. This was specifically, I need you to work. Now, who here can come up with some good excuses why not to work? Keeping in mind, he's 500 years old.
Tired.
What's the first one? Tired. Yeah. He's tuckered. So, who else can come up with another reason why not to work?
What's the point?
What's the point? I mean, it can get a little frustrating, can't it? It's like, why am I even doing this? And when you keep in mind that he was 500 when God came to him and said, I need you to do this, and the flood came when he was 600. How long did he want him to work? 100 years. Let's face it, in our society, everybody by 55 is going, what? Can't I retire yet? Oh, man, I've been working since I was like 23, 24. It's like, oh, he's heard everything. Oh, I can't. No, 100 years he's going to be working on this project, but he's got to work, which is kind of interesting. Anybody know what Noah means? I find this interesting. I never looked it up before.
Is it? Oh gosh, I know. No, I don't remember exactly what.
His name means rest. So
Oh,
a man
boy.
named Rest
Yeah.
was told to do what?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
No rest. What's that?
It's actually in the Bible.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's in there. Because the world would find rest from all of this sin that had overcome it through him. So he's going to have to work. So let's take a look at it. Let's go back to Genesis chapter 5. Now let's first of all, let's look at his lineage again. He is this godly line of Seth. Seth was God's replacement of Abel. And Seth was a godly man. We have, even though the world's going crazy, immediately we see this godly line of Seth, and not the whole line of Seth, though. It's really just kind of one little family each generation. that chooses to follow God completely. So let's take a look at it. Genesis chapter 5, verses 29 through 32. Corey, you got that?
Say again?
Genesis 5, 29 through 32.
Yes, I will have that.
Okay.
5:29-32.
Yep.
And he called his name Noah, saying, This same shall comfort us concerning our work and toil of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord hath cursed. And Lamech lived after he begat Noah 595 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. And Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
Okay, so Lamech was the son of Methuselah. Methuselah was the son of Enoch. These were godly men who walked with God. And again, Lamech, after he had Noah, lived 595 years. 5 years later, after Lamech died, the flood. And Lamech's father, Methuselah, lived 5 years longer than his son. So he lived a long time. I love that he lived how many years though? 777. Do you think there's any point in that? Yeah, God likes numbers. He likes to flick us every once in a while, so pay attention, right? 777. And Noah was 500 years old when he had all of these sons, and that's when God came to him. And what did God decide? Verses 1 through 3. Derek, of chapter 6.
And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years.
Okay. There's a lot of controversy about what are these sons of God and things like that. To me, I always like the easy, the clear definition. From what's going on, we had this godly line of who? Seth. We also have this other line of Cain and all the rest of them. And they're going off, and what are they doing? Evil. And the sons of Seth. So in that line, the men of that line started looking at the pretty women in the Cain line, and what did they start doing? Intermarrying, and that just made the whole place a mess, right? And finally God looked down and said, I'm having a hard time just keeping one straight in this mess. This is getting horrible. I'm barely picking out one here that's not going that way. So I'm going to give them 120 years. From the time he made that proclamation, 120 years later. So this is 20 years before he even came to Noah. So he has already decided what? I'm giving 120 years. So what do we see here? God's judgment, also his patience. I always remind everybody, if the world had repented, if they would have seen this giant ark and Noah would have said, God's going to flood this place, and they all said, oh no, let us repent, what would God have done? He would not have destroyed them. Now, if Nineveh's any example, probably 300 years later he would have. But God is patient, isn't he? And he basically said, I've got 120 years, and I also have a plan. Because he looked down. Let's look at 5 through 7 first. Who wants to read? Bob? What else did he see? So we have this intermingling, and the place is a mess. 120 years, what did God see?
God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart were only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast and creeping thing, and fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them.
Yeah, it's bad when God says, I am sorry that I even made them. Because they had no interest in him at all. They're God, they're creator. And they've gone, how absolute is this? Every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually.
I just don't understand how it went so bad so fast.
Yeah.
To me, it's just ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. And basically what we learn from the Bible is everybody did what was right in his own heart.
That soon.
That soon, yeah. And that's what it would be. I mean, if there was no godly nation, at least a beacon of some sort like Israel, if there was no church, if there was no God's people, there was no light, what will mankind naturally do? It's an indictment, isn't it? And how many times people say, well, if there were just no religion, if there was just no right or wrong, if there was just no, then we just know to do what's right and we would do what's right. Has that ever happened?
No.
Here's the example. Has that ever happened? We couldn't even do it when Adam and Eve lived in a perfect world and had no sin nature. They couldn't even get out of that alive. So, I mean, there's just no way. And this is what happened, right? But there's a great testimony of one man. Chapter 6, verses 8 and 9. Matthew?
But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God.
Okay. I want you to notice that walk with God, because that walk with God is the same as said about who? Enoch. He walked with God. He walked in his steps. And all the generations, basically what this is saying is out of all the people in the world, there's one in his generation. His father Lamech was one in his generation. Methuselah was one in his generation. They may not have been the only ones. But Noah, it appears to say, is the one in his generations that actually walked with God. And because of that, we have the call. Verses 11 through 13. Amy?
Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth.
Okay, so he comes and gives this wonderful message to Noah. Again, you've been living in this place for 500 years, and all of a sudden God says, what? I've had it. How many think this was a bit of a shock to Noah? After 500 years, what do you just think? This is just the way it is, right? But do you think Noah noticed what was going on? Yeah, because again, he, like his father and his grandfather and his great-grandfather, and before that, they, in spite of what was going on in the world, they walked with God. By what? By faith. That there is a God, he will hold us accountable, and he knows what is right, right? By faith, they did that. And now, by faith, he's going to ask Noah to do something else. Not just walk by faith, not just walk with him, not just to give your best, but I'm going to ask you to do some work. And what was that work? Derek, can you please do, let's see. Let's do the promise first, 17 and 18. Sorry, 17 and 18 of chapter 6. Let's do the promise first.
Okay. And behold, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die. But with thee will I establish my covenant, and thou shalt come into the ark, thou and thy sons, thy wife, and thy sons' wives with thee.
Okay. So, I've had it. I'm sorry that I even made these people. I have one man, Noah. I noticed him. He is one who walks with me. He comes and says, Noah, you are the one. And I promise what? There's two promises here. What are the two promises?
I will flood.
I will flood.
And every living
I will hold them
breathing
accountable.
thing.
There will be judgment for what they have done. And the second one is what?
I will save you.
I will save you, your wife, your 3 sons, and their wives. But basically we know anybody who was on the ark, any flesh that was on the ark, including the animals, right, that were on the ark would all be saved, right? Does that sound familiar to anybody, by the way? What two promises are we living under right now? God will judge. And anybody whose name is not written in the book of life will be cast in the lake of fire forever, right? That's a promise. We haven't seen it yet. We're going to be held accountable. What's the second promise? Anybody whose name is written in the book of life will what? They got on the ark, they will be what? Saved. And they will enter into his kingdom forever.
I must remember from the Tree of Life study
Yes, sir.
that, wood, the wood, in the Noah story is part of a pattern that culminates at the wooden cross, which is pretty neat.
Yep. No, it's very, very cool. The imagery is very much the same. Yeah. And he was saved by a boat, and we were saved by the cross, right? But who's doing the work? By faith, Noah was going to have to do some work. What if Noah would have said, yeah, I believe you, 100%, you're going to destroy this thing, you're going to save me, but I really don't want to build a boat. I don't know how, I don't know I don't understand what this is, I don't have the time. My 3 kids, I mean, we don't know how old they are, they're married. But they're carpenters. They know what they're doing. I think I got these animals on there. I got to get all this stuff and gather it. I mean, it's gonna take 100 years. What, are you kidding me? Plus what? Nobody's gonna listen. In fact, they're going to what? Likely. What would you do if you saw a man building a boat out in the middle of there nowhere?
Make fun of him.
Make fun of him. They will mock him. And when he says God is going to destroy everything, what are they going to say?
Okay.
Oh, we're not that bad. I mean, what God? There is no God. You're just crazy.
And no one knew at that time that the rest of his family, his brothers and sisters, were lost.
Yeah. Yeah.
No hope.
Yep. Again, his father and his grandfather are still alive, but God didn't say they'd be on the boat, but God took care of that. So they went home a different way. And again, we see in these 2 who walked with God, by the way, we do see the image of us as well. Because those who walk with God will either just go and be with him like the rapture, or they will be like Noah who will die but be saved, right? So we see the picture in Noah and Enoch, his great-grandfather. So lineage, judgment, testimony, the call, the promise. Now let's get, what does he want him to do? Let's go to chapter 6, verse 14. I think we got Corey. Is that correct? 6:14. Can you read chapter 6, verses 14 through 16, please?
Make thee an ark of gopher wood. Green shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. This is the fashion which thou shalt make it of. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, the height of it 30 cubits. A window shalt thou make to the ark, and in a cubit thou shalt finish it above. And the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side thereof, with lower, second, and third stories shalt thou make it.
Okay. And he said, what's a cubit? No. Anybody know what a cubit is? I love English measuring. Anybody know what a cubit is?
About 18 inches.
There to there. By the way, normal human-sized man, that's a foot. It's actually the same size as your foot. Try it at home. How many people are going to try this at home? You ever want to know your shoe size? That's your foot size.
Whoa! Whoa! It's not lying.
Yeah. That's roughly a foot, and this is a cubit. It's about 18 inches. So we actually measure this out with the kids. That's always a fun little project. We start at the very end of the parking lot here, and we measure out what would be the length of this ark. And basically it goes down across the street and 3 houses down is how long this boat was. And it's taller than the church and much, much, much wider. Basically the middle of the field over there to the middle of the field over there. This is a giant. And the one thing that would really, I'd say, we got to do that is, you want me to pitch inside and out?
Oh, man.
I gotta build it, and then I gotta take this tar pitch. How do you get that much of it? Just carrying it there would have been a tremendous amount of work. 100 years. And you gotta build and then cover it.
And you couldn't run a crane or anything.
No cranes and everything. I mean, it's just, that's a lot of work, isn't it? It's got 3 stories, and he's got to get stalls, and he's got to do all that stuff. And is that the end of it? No. Verses, who are we up to? Bob? 19 through 22. 19 through 21, if you would.
And of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark, to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female. Of fowls after their kind, and of cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing of the earth after his kind. 2 of every sort shall come unto thee to keep them alive. And take thou unto thee of all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be for food for thee and for them.
This sounds like a lot of work, doesn't it? Now I gotta gather animals, and I gotta get the animals in there, and the bugs. I gotta get to everything, and then they had the clean animals, and they had to have more of those, 7 of those, and then they had all the birds, just trying to get the birds wrangled. I mean, talk about herding cats. I mean, big cats, little cats, everybody trying to keep them all in there, and then also what? You gotta get the supplies. How much food would it take? By the way, who knows here how long they were in the ark? The Bible tells us exactly.
Is it? I'm taking a guess.
40 days?
My
No.
gut's telling me 180.
No.
Dang.
Several months waiting for it to.
1 year, 10 days. It was May the 17th to May the 27th of the next year before they actually got out. They were on land. They landed on land before they actually came out to a land that actually had fruits and things growing on trees so that they could live. Was over a year. So how much food do they have to have? How many motion sickness bags do they need to have? I mean, it just, yeah. And you got to gather it all up. No refrigeration. No Uber Eats.
He was living in kind of a hell of his own, wasn't he?
Yeah.
That's
For 100,
awful.
you wonder why it took 100 years? You had to get it all.
Hmm.
But here's the beauty of the story. By faith, we have verse 22. Matthew. Verse 22.
Thus did Noah according to all that God commanded him, so did he.
He what? Just did it. Does that take faith? Faith that what? What is he putting his, what is he trusting here?
Well, it says in Hebrews, he feared the Lord. He feared that what God told him was indeed true, and that ought to compel one to
Ought to
obey.
motivate you, right?
Yeah.
I'm saving my family. I'm saving all these animals. I'm saving what? Human race. I'm saving, and anybody else who wants to get on, I'm saving them. Had faith that he was going to do it, and also that it would float, that it would work, that God would keep his promise. And I think those first hours, when that door closed, and the heavens opened, and the ground opened, and water was everywhere, and you just got lifted up on the ground, off the ground. What are you thinking? Did we pitch it inside and out everywhere? Ham? Did you get everywhere? I would have been. I wouldn't have been able to sleep the first 5 days. I would have been just going up and down the ark looking for leaks. But they had to have faith, right? Faith that God was going to do what he said he was going to do, and that God would also keep his promise to save them. And that this would do it. This ark would do it. The ark would be big enough to get all the animals on and everything. And he what? It just simply says he did it. In fact, look at verse 7 of chapter 7. Because the day came when they were supposed to get in the ark. And again, I like what it says, verse 7 of chapter 7. And Noah went in, and his sons and his wife and his son's wife with him into the ark because of the waters of the flood. When God said go in, what did they do? They went in because we know those floods are coming. We know who else got in with them. Nobody. Nobody else in the world believed. And by faith they said, no, I want you to put your place in the sons. They're putting their faith also, aren't they? Who did his sons put their faith in? Their father, that he's not crazy, right? But think about this. What about his wife? She's not of that family. What about the sons' daughters? What about their families, their father, their mother, their brothers and sisters? They're in this crazy family. How much was the world trying to pull them away from God? How much was this pressure was that? We like to see the stories like, oh yeah, and he did it, and it was great. How hard was this? How much faith did it put when nobody believed them? It seemed like nothing was happening, and 100 years went by, and nothing happened. Until it happened. Are we living in that kind of days?
We're living in the days of scoffers, as Peter said.
Yep. And of course, what's the result? What happened? Did God preserve them? Yep. Look at chapter 8, verse 14. Let's see. Derek. 8, 14, 15, and 16.
And in the second month, on the 27th day of the month, was the earth dried. And God spake unto Noah, saying, Go forth of the ark, thou and thy wife and thy sons wives with thee.
Okay. And also bring all the animals out, bring everything out. It's time to get out. Now again, they went in on the second month and 17th day of the month. So it was a year later and 10 days that they came out. And the world was ready and prepared. There was fruit on the trees, there was grass on the ground, and the sun was out. What else was there in the sky? A rainbow, saying he would never do that again. He brought his sacrifices unto God, and they worshiped God, right? So the result was he was saved. Now that brings us to us. What does this have to do with us? How many of us here are going to be asked to build an ark? No. But do we have work we need to do?
Oh, no, I'm going to be asked to build an ark.
Yeah, a little
Yeah.
some guy in Kansas did, didn't he? Actually, it's like, was it about 3 arks in the world somewhere? I think there's like 3 of them. So, was that?
That's several.
Yeah, some people built these things so to show it, but what are they showing? I don't know. But that means we have different work to do, and we have to be like Noah, right? I don't care how crazy it sounds, improbable it sounds. I don't care if people believe me or not, or think I'm nuts. I don't care if nobody comes along. If God tells me to do it, I'm going to what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to do whatever work.
And the ark didn't have a rudder.
No.
So when he went in, he was completely in God's hands.
Yep. And landed exactly where it was supposed to. Wherever that was. Mount Ararat. No, everybody's been looking for that thing forever, haven't they? I don't know why they keep looking for the ark.
Well, there'll be a little sign there, Noah was here.
Well, to me, the first thing I would do if I was Noah and his family was break up the ark. Because I cut down all that wood, I'm not going to go cut some more wood. I'm going to use it to build houses. It's all waterproofed even. That'd be great stuff. I'd build more boats out of it. I mean, that's what Japheth evidently did. He went sailing all over the place. I'd build more boats with it. I don't know why they expected it just to kind of sit there. Who would leave that 100 years of work and say, see ya? I'll leave it for a while. It probably stunk. But all right, so let's get to us. Let's get to us because there's 2 places in the Bible, and specifically, that mention the days of Noah and the flood. So let's go to Matthew chapter 24. Verse 35. Matthew, can you read verses 35 through 38 of Matthew chapter 24?
Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my word shall not pass away. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark.
Okay, so he starts with here what? Heaven and earth shall pass away. There will be what? Judgment. People will be held accountable, and all these things that we think are more important than God, more important than worshiping God, all these things we treasure, all these things we refuse to sacrifice to God, all these people we try to impress instead of God, they're all going what? They're all going away, right? God will judge. But what? Of that day and hour we don't know. And that's the funny thing. I think Noah knew. Because God had already said 120 years, right? So if he says that in the Bible, I don't know why he wouldn't have told Noah, this is about the time I'm going to do this. Or he probably realized when his dad and then his grandpa died. It's like, oh, we're getting close. But anyways, we don't know, do we? So what do we have to just keep doing? Keep working until God says done. Now he says, like back then, what is our time like? But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Whereas in the days that were before the flood, they were what? Eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day of Noah entered into the ark. Now, is there something against eating? It doesn't say gorging themselves. Is there something against drinking? It doesn't even say it's alcoholic necessarily. What were they doing? Something against marrying? Or giving in marriage? So what were they doing what are they doing so bad nowadays?
That's all they care about.
That's all they care about. Who's not part of the eating and the drinking and the marriage and giving in marriage? God's know in their minds. Is the warning going out? Whose job is it? Whose work is it to let them know that judgment is coming? Our job. Can it be difficult? Because first of all, we have to believe it's coming. And how many here believe that it's coming? We have to believe that it's coming. We have to believe that it's soon. I don't know what soon means, but we have to believe that it is coming, right? And it's coming soon. And also that it matters, right? That if people do not put their faith in Jesus Christ, will God judge them? Will they be cast away forever? Is this a big deal? We have to believe his promise that he will save us and anybody else. Doesn't matter what they've done. We have to believe that, yes, he will save them because he promised that, right? We have to put our faith in those promises. He will judge and he will save, right? But sometimes we say what? Well, the work's awfully hard. People aren't listening. I've got my own things to do. Have you ever wondered how Noah fed his family? He had to have built that during what? Off hours. Had to have a job. I don't know how else he could do it, right? I mean, I don't know when he built it. And we can get the same thing. I got to take care of my family. I got to do this. I got to do that. I don't have time for the work. God says what? I got work for you to do. So what? Do it, right? In fact, what does it say in verse 39? And they knew not until the flood came and took them away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. It'll be sudden, just like the flood. Even though they were told, it'll still catch them unawares, right? When they're doing what? And only those who put their faith in Jesus Christ will be saved. Let's jump down to verse 45 through 47. Who just read? Matthew? Amy.
Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom his master has set over his household to give them their food at the proper time? Blessed is that servant whom his master will find so doing when he comes. Truly I say to you, he will set him over all his possessions.
Okay. When God comes, he expects us, when that day happens, what does he expect to find us doing? Watching and working, right? Doing our job, whatever it is. Job of witnessing, being a light, job of service to others and ministering to the needs of others. Whatever the work that God has for us, he will expect us to be doing it. And if we are, then we will be rewarded. Again, we have to have faith there too, right? That it's worthwhile, whatever the work it is we have. And that he will reward us for a job well done, right? That's what the work is all about. Let's jump to 2 Peter chapter 3. Bob alluded to this earlier. 2 Peter chapter 3. There will be scoffers. And that makes it hard. Who likes to be made fun of? No one likes to be made fun of. In fact, the louder they get, sometimes the more in our minds like, well, are we right? They all, they all believe that way. Maybe they're right? No, they're not. No, it's clear they're not. But it is hard, isn't it? When everybody else believes something. And you're the one standing up and saying, no, that's not right. And if you ever feel that way, think, what about Noah? He can go talk to his dad and his grandpa, and that was about it in his family. That's the only people he can talk to about this. That's very lonely, but we got to keep doing the work, right? In fact, what does it say? Corey, verses chapter 3 of 2 Peter, verses 3, 4, and 5.
Knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers, walking after their own lusts, and saying, Where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. For this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water.
Okay, so then the flood came, right? So we're living in that time. How long have we been living in that time? Well, since Jesus left. I mean, really hasn't been much of a change. It's just a constant barrage, a constant in this world that people scoff at the idea that there'll be judgment, that Jesus is coming again, right? And he hasn't come yet. That clearly means he's not coming, because that's the way logic works. If something's never happened, that means it'll never happen, right? That's the dumbest thing ever. Especially they're willfully ignorant. God has judged the world before, hasn't he? When has God judged the world? Flood, but many times since then too. How many nations have been judged? How many individuals have been judged because of their sin? Will God hold them accountable? Yes, we have to believe that. And we have to continue to work to make sure others know it too. That's our job. In fact, jump down to verse 10. Derek, verses 10 and 11, please.
But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up. Seeing then that all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of persons ought ye to be in all holy conversation and godliness?
Verse 12 too.
Looking for and hasting unto the coming of the day of God, wherein the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat.
So his question is, given that that judgment is coming, what should we be doing? What is our work? And he says, basically our work is to what? Constantly be about holy conversation, a holy way of life, and living godly, right? Basically being a light that Jesus talked about, right? Constantly being that salt and light in this dark world. And that's the beauty of this, because in whatever our work may not be building a giant ark. You may not be a pastor, but even any work you do, whether it's at Booz Allen Hamilton, whether it's at, a plumber, or whether it's at whatever Corey does for a living, fixes things. So wherever you're at, whatever work you'll be doing, whatever role you are playing, your work is to do the will of the Lord, right?
And Noah lived 500 years not having anything to do with an ark.
Right.
And he was a godly man in all those 500 years.
Right.
Like our whole life isn't one big ark moment.
Right.
But we may have ark moments, but
Yeah.
like life is still a walk of faith and a practice that all along the way, so that come that day, come that time, we are, we respond with and have had our faith matured and tested. So.
That's right. Yeah. And that's what he needs of his people, right? By faith, right? It takes faith to do the will of the Lord, to walk in his steps, to walk with him as Noah did. And then when God says, I have this work for you to do, I need you to talk to this person, I need you to do this, I need you to serve here, I need you to do this, we need to be like Noah, who says what? Oh, I've been doing that stuff all my life. I don't got time for that. No, it's got to be what? Okay, yeah, I'll do that then. I'll do whatever you. So, here's the cool thing. We're all related to Noah, so we got it in us. It's in there. Everybody in the world is related to Noah by blood. So, it's in us to go out and do this. But it takes the Spirit, doesn't it? So, we are saved by faith. We also, by faith, please God. Whether it's giving the best, whether it's pleasing him and walking with him, or if it's called upon whatever work he has us to do. And we just what? Do it. No matter how big it is, how difficult it is, whether it makes sense, whether anybody else really gets it, or whether anybody else is even impacted by it. Everybody ignores you. It's okay. Just do it, right? Because God's got his plans. Do we trust him enough? Do we have enough faith in him that he does, right? Any thoughts? Yes.
So Noah was named with a prophecy, basically. And then it's sort of like Abraham. He didn't have any children for 500 years. And it must have been a great test of his faith to believe God was going to make that prophecy come true.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we're not quite sure when in that 500 years he had Ham and Shem and Japheth. It says,
It says after.
Yeah.
This version, ESV says after Noah was 500 years old.
Yeah, other ones interpret it more of in that 500 years because they already had wives, but there's a lot of debate on that. Whether they had wives after that, because he talks about them in the beginning, but that's going to be a prophecy anyway. So it's hard numbers, but you're right. I mean, he was chosen early. Even before he was born, he was chosen to do this job. Even before God had decided, I'm going to give him 120 years. I mean, you start looking at the timeline, it was all set in place, wasn't it? And that this line was going to happen this way. Even what happened to Enoch and Methuselah and Lamech. I mean, it's just all, God had a plan. And all it took was Noah just to say, by faith, I'm going to do it. I don't care about any of those excuses. I'm just going to do it. And we can all be thankful because we would not be here.
I'm trying to figure out why he just didn't make that the end.
Yeah, skip it. Yeah, just wipe them out. Because that wasn't his plan. He still had to send Jesus before the foundations of the earth. Knowing all of this, he knew he was going to send his son. So, and we're going to see, after that, and God said, okay, I can't let just individuals do their thing. I'm going to break them up. And he ended up, after Babel, he was like, these individual things are just a joke. All they do is end up causing trouble. I'm going to break them up into nations. These nations will serve me, and none of the nations will serve him. So then he has to take what? Abraham. And say, I'm going to make a nation of you. So that's what we'll look at next week, is that step of faith and what it took for Abraham. Yeah? That's right. So we'll look at that next step of God, and, how much faith did it take for Abraham and Sarah to leave the family and just go to a land God was going to show them, and how much. And there's a great vision in Hebrews chapter 11 about us too, and how we do the same thing, hoping of a land that we've never seen. So it's a beautiful picture of us again, and we've got to do the same, right? All right. Let's pray.
I heard your daughter say because he loved us when I asked that question.
Mm-hmm.
But there are only more and more people to go to hell.
Yeah.
So.
But more and more people love him, and that's his. At the end of the day, he's going to have a whole bunch of people who chose to love him. That's what the new heaven and new earth will be populated by. So, and it'll be full. I will be surprised how many people are going to be there. I mean, compared to the whole history of mankind, it's not very big, but it's quite a few. So, many, many people. So, we'll all be together. We'll actually get along. As long as so-and-so ain't there. No.
There won't be any denominations.
Right. Let's pray.